What's up, guys? Justin here with the CGEssentials.com, back with another Blender terrain modeling tutorial for you. So in today's video, we're going to talk about how to create flat pads on terrain inside of Blender. So this can be really helpful if you're trying to make like a house pad or something like that that kind of goes into a hill, that kind of thing. So let's go ahead and just jump into it. All right, so I'm going to show you a couple different things we can do with this. So first off, this is a terrain I've created with the free A.N.T landscapes function that's built inside of Blender. You can see how it's made up of a whole bunch of different quad geometry, just kind of making up a terrain. And what we want to do is we want to come in here and we want to make a couple flat areas on the terrain. So I'm going to show you a couple different ways to do that. So the first thing we want to do is we want to start by doing a Shift A, we want to add a plane to our scene. I'm going to scale that down. I'll move it up a little bit. I kind of want it above the terrain for right now. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick a spot for this. So maybe like right here. So let's say on this terrain we wanted to create like a flat building pad right here. And so one thing you could do is you could come in here and just create this shape and then just tab into edit mode and just extrude this down through your ground like this. So that's probably going to be the simplest way to do this, is just going to be to take this and just extrude it through the ground. Now that being said, it doesn't really interact with our terrain, so it's not really like the most ideal way of doing this, right? You could use booleans to kind of join them together and all of that, but I don't think it's really going to get you the result that you're looking for. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to talk about how we can use a pad, and so we'll just create a new plane, scale it down, and we'll just place it over here. And so what I want to do is I want to use this plane in order to cut into the terrain right here, right? We can make this a little bit bigger. So I'm just going to scale this out. I'm going to make sure that I apply my rotation and my scale. But what we want to do now is we want to intersect this with our terrain. And so the way that we can do this is we can use the knife project function in order to do this. So what we want to do if we want to use knife project is we want to start by selecting the object that we want to cut into. So in this case, that's going to be our terrain right here. Then I'm just going to tab into edit mode. So that's got me in the mode where I can select the individual faces. I'm just going to hit A. And then what we need to do is we need to select this object because that's going to be our object that we're going to cut the terrain with. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to hold the control key and click on this surface right here. So what that's done is that's allowed me to select this terrain and then also select this object. Well, now there's an option over in the mesh dropdown for knife project. And what we want to do first is we want to look at this from a top-down view like this. So we're top down, we're ready to look at this. Now I'm going to go to mesh, knife project. And so what that's going to do is that's going to take my geometry right here that I created, and it's going to project it into our terrain right here. And so now what I have is I have a piece of geometry that I can edit. And so in this case, what I usually do is I'll just scale this along the Z axis. So I'll do an SZ to scale this. Well, what that's going to do is that's going to allow me to scale this so that all of my vertices and edges and faces are all in the same plane. So I'm just going to do an SZ. I'm going to type in a value of 0. Well, what that's done is that's allowed me to create this flat spot on my terrain where I could now come in here and I could start modeling out a house or really anything else that I want to create. Now, there's a couple things about this. The first off is it's kind of limited, right? Or not even limited, but like for example, I could like scale this in or out, but let's say that I wanted a certain amount of transition between my flat pad and my pad over here. So I can make this smaller, right? And I can have this automatically kind of transition as the edges kind of adjust to go with the vertices, but I can't make it bigger because it's going to overlap, right? So at some point it's going to overlap right here, and it's not going to allow me to really have a larger transition in my terrain. And so the way that you can fix that is, let's say that you want to put something, maybe let's go with this spot right here, but let's say you wanted a wider transition between the terrain and your flat spot. Well, what you could do is you could do something very similar to what we did before. So we can do a Shift A, add a plane, and I'm just going to scale it down like this. But this time I'm going to create two planes. So first off, I'm going to create a plane that's going to represent the very edge of my disturbed area, right? So something like this. And I'm going to go ahead and apply rotation and scale. But then I'm going to create another mesh that's going to go inside of this, and that's going to represent my actual flat area, right? And so what I'm doing is I'm basically creating two meshes in here. One is my flat footprint and one is my transition area, right? That's going to be the area around the outside where my ground is going to transition from the terrain to the spot right here. It's kind of like sloping dirt back when you do earthwork in construction. And so what we want to do is we want to do something very similar, right? We want to tab into edit mode with the selected, and then we want to do a control click. And it can actually be helpful to get this a little bit further away from your object, but we're going to do a control click and select that right here. And then we're just going to do a knife project again. So top down view, mesh, knife project, like this, right? So what that's done is that's cut this geometry into our shape right here. Well, then what I'm going to do, I'm going to do an Alt Shift or a Shift Alt and click on this in order to deselect my perimeter edge loop, but then I'm just going to do an X and I'm going to delete out my edges. What that's done is that's given me kind of a clear space in here where I can delete this out without having a whole bunch of like trailing edges or anything like that. Well, then we're going to come in here and we're going to move our building pad to right here, right? And we can go ahead and hide this for right now. And so what we want to do is we want to create this as our building pad, and then we want to fill in geometry around the perimeter here so that this has a nice slope to it. So I'm just going to select this object and do a shift click and select this object. And I'm just going to do a control J to join them into one object. But now I'm going to tab into edit mode. And so what we need to do is we need to bridge the loops right here, or the gaps. And so there's a couple ways we can do this. So first off, what we could do is we could just select these edges by doing a control click and then do a shift click and select this edge. And then we could come in here under the edge settings and click on the option for bridge edge loops. So that's going to add geometry in here. The only thing is it's kind of messy topology. This kind of depends on what you actually want to do with your geometry in the future. So that's one way we could do this. Another way we could do this is we could count the number of points that are going to be in here. So we could also look at the number of points that are in here, and then we could take this mesh, all right, this one right here, we could select it, and then we could right click and we could subdivide it, and we could give it 10 cuts. And then you could do a control click over here, then you could do a shift click and a shift control click over here. That's going to select all these edges. Well, now you can do a bridge edge loops. You can see how your topology is still kind of ugly, but it's not as ugly as it was before. So there's a few different options in here for the way you can kind of split this up in order to create this topology. We're going to go ahead and call this good for right now. And we're just going to go around and do this with the rest of this as well. So I'm just going to do a control click, bridge edge loops, bridge edge loops, bridge edge loops. So now, if I was to come in here and I was to adjust like these faces, for example, so I'm going to go to top down view, do a face select. But now I could scale this in and out. I can move it up and down, and you can see how the terrain is going to adjust along with this. So you can use this in order to create that geometry around the perimeter right here. All right, so that's where I'm going to end this video. If you'd like me to go more in depth on this subject, or if you have a better way to do this, let me know in the comments down below. I'm always interested in new ways to do things in Blender. If you like what I'm doing in this channel, please consider supporting me on Patreon. Every little bit helps, so make sure you check out that link in the notes down below. But in any case, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this. I really appreciate it, and I will catch you in the next video. Thanks, guys.